Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on RMM and PSA, the perfect combination. I want to remind you all that you are all in attendee mode, which means you are muted. But if you have questions, make use of the questions panel. We will be answering them towards the end of the webinar. We will also be sending out a recording in the following days, which reminds me, we are recording. I am joined this morning by Brian Zimmerman, who is a senior product manager at SolarWinds MSP, as well as Jeff Hardy, a senior technical sales manager at SolarWinds MSP. Today, Jeff and Brian will discuss the characteristics of more reactive versus proactive MSPs, the importance of striving for a more proactive business. They'll also explore the main barriers that keep MSPs from being more proactive and the tools that MSPs typically employ to automate their processes. And most importantly, why we are all here, why an integrated and RMM and PSA solution can be the key to helping your business become extremely proactive and bring you maximum success. So without further ado, Brian, what is the difference between proactive and reactive business models?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ashley, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So there's a few things we want to talk about. First of all, let's define what we're discussing. So a reactive business model or a reactive task are you responding to requests that come from customers, that come from emails, things that have gone wrong in the environment and fire alerts through your RMM system, anything that suggests reacting to a fire that exists or a problem that the customer is experiencing. Whereas proactive tasks and a proactive workflow is all about trying to prevent problems from happening. Typically, you will often be reacting to an alert or a thing that has alerted you to the problem. However, you'll be doing it before the problem actually affects the customer. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about reactive versus proactive. And there's a couple misconceptions to clear up first. This is definitely a non-binary thing here. So it is not true that you are a reactive business or a proactive business. By necessity, everybody is both. We've seen MSPs who are 90% reactive, 10% proactive. We've seen MSPs that are 80% proactive, 20% reactive, 60-40, 50-50. I think the average is either a split or actually tending more towards the reactive side of things. And that, of course, changes based off your vertical, your MSP characteristics, your size, your maturity, and a bunch of other factors. The thing we want to talk about in this webinar, and we'll talk specifically later about some of the strategies and tools and scenarios that help make this true. But as an MSP moves to the right of this slide, there are actually a number of benefits that they get from their technicians, from their customers, and their business themselves. You know, first of all, and most importantly here is the fact that if you're entirely reactive, everything's an emergency. And if everything's an emergency, nothing's really an emergency. If you're fighting fires all day long, then you're not really able to plan your work and able to prioritize your work. If you're being proactive, you're actually much more effectively setting your customers up for success. Things will be much less chaotic, much more organized, and there will be marked benefit to the MSP. Time to resolution, number of cases resolved, billable hours, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But there's a lot of value that this brings.
You know, that's absolutely true, Brian. You know, I was looking at it and I realized that, you know, initially I used to think there was just IT people, or maybe they would call themselves MSPs. But in this case, you know, I've noticed that reactive versus proactive, it's absolutely a conversation that is had for sure. Basically, customers, maybe they start out as reactive and it's more of a journey going from reactive to say they want to be more proactive, because they know that they can be much more profitable and be more efficient when they're able to actually take their business and schedule things out, so that instead of having to fix broken things and waiting for something to break, they actually keep their customers' networks working properly. And at that point, everything just runs so much smoother. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think what you mentioned about a journey makes a lot of sense. If you're a one-man shop and you're just starting fixing problems, well, then the most important thing to do is to fix problems. Some of those are proactive, some of them are reactive problems, but you're fixing problems. And also, when you're a business of one, you don't have to think about proactive models and workflows and strategies, because it's really just what you do as a business of one. But as you grow in size and maturity, it becomes a lot harder to build those proactive tasks out. And having a strategy and a workflow and a system in place becomes much more important because it's more than just you. It's about your entire team and your business. We talked about some of the benefits that you get of being proactive. And to illustrate this point, there's an example that comes to mind. One of the things we like to do in product management is visit customers on site, walk a mile in their shoes, really see what's going on the ground in their business. We love doing this. It's a great source of information that helps us build solutions for the future. And there's an example that comes to mind on this topic. I was in a city visiting several MSPs, and two of them were literally down the road from each other. They serviced the same vertical, they were the same size, they used similar tool sets, similar business models, similar pricing. Looking at the businesses from outside, you would almost think they were the same, but inside the business, they were very different. One of them was primarily reactive, one of them was primarily proactive. The reactive business mostly focused on resolving tickets, resolving issues, fixing things that came up through their ticketing or through their incident management system. The other MSP was actually focused heavily on trying to make sure that things weren't going wrong in their environment. They had much more predictive alerting. They had policies and maintenance schedules that they were doing, and a lot more to try and get ahead of things. And what they saw as a benefit was they had a higher device consolidation ratio to their technicians. They had higher profitability for their business, higher billable time, which of course leads to that profitability, and very much a feeling of being a lot less chaotic and a lot more measured in how they were able to plan, how they were able to act, and the service they deliver to their customers. And the biggest part about that is credibility in the eyes of the customer. If a thing goes wrong, your customer may not forgive you for that mistake. They'll often forgive you and they'll forgive you in time, but if something major goes wrong, that is a stain on that relationship. So the best thing to do is to try and remove things going wrong. Being reactive means you're reacting to a problem. Being proactive means you're trying to prevent problems. Preventing problems means preventing things that go wrong to your customers, which means maintaining that relationship. Customers don't pay you for fixing issues. In reality, they pay you for being more productive in their business endeavors, and being proactive actually helps do that by limiting the number of problems that actually go wrong, limiting the fires that occur. Fighting them effectively is important, but preventing them from happening is even better.
That's absolutely true, Brian. Matter of fact, now that I was sitting there thinking about it, you were talking about the customer. The one thing that MSPs or technicians like to talk about, or better yet, actually are scared to talk about, is actually hiring that first tech, for example. So I've heard this in the past, that the scariest thing to do outside of public speaking is hiring that first technician. So, having the ability to have that technician where they can keep them less stressed and keep them on task, but at the same time, like you mentioned, that and when everything's an emergency, nothing is, so that they could properly triage issues if there are any, or better yet, maybe it's just normal maintenance, and at this point, it's not even stressful at all. It's just a part of their job. So being able to be more proactive will allow you to be able to have your technicians to be more proactive, or excuse me, more profitable in general as the company is. But more importantly, I think that the MSP would actually, or doesn't want to hire that technician, for example, because they know that it's reactive and they know what kind of storm they have. And they're trying to avoid bringing someone else into that confusion. So again, having the proactive mentality in this particular regard would allow you to have more profitable technicians as well.
Great. And Jeff, in your experience, does having a more proactive framework affect the experience of that technician in their day-to-day at all? Is their life different in some marked way?
Oh, I believe so. They're probably more happier to come to work because if, like you mentioned, being an emergency, that if their hair's on fire every time they come to work, they may not want to come to work. And if they're dealing with a customer that's impatient, that wanted whatever was supposed to be corrected yesterday, then at that point, everything is stressful, just more stressful in that regard. So being able to come to do your normal, hey, you know what, today is going to be maintenance for patch management or something to that effect, is much better than customer servers down and they're losing $10,000 an hour.
Right. And that will definitely help with things like employee retention and, of course, hiring employees. Jeff, you mentioned how difficult it is to hire that first employee. It's hard to find good people all the time. So it's depending on your market, but I know here it definitely is finding the best people is a real hard part of any business. And another thing about, in terms of just direct business impact, fires can't be scheduled, right? So if you're fighting fires, you don't really know when they're going to happen. And that means that planning your resourcing is much more difficult. If the percentage of your business is more proactive, then you have more predictability about your resource usage and your tasks. So from a business perspective, you can have better utilization, better percentage of billable tasks and hours, and better predictability in terms of how busy you will be. Fires are going to happen. There's no way to prevent that, especially when there's industry things that come up that you need to react to. For instance, the WannaCry incident a while back, that was extremely important and likely caused a load on every MSP out there. So you can't prevent that. But if that's a small portion of what you do, then the variability in terms of the load on your technician's time is going to be smaller, and you'll be more predictable and have either more profitability or reduce the risk that you'll run out of time and resources.
That's true. That's true. And what's interesting is when you're talking about those technicians. So let's just say that you want to be more proactive. So how would you do that? Well, I can first tell you that if you're using email as your go-to to help your customers' problems, probably not ideal. I'm not saying don't use email at all. I'm just saying do not let that be where everything you have is housed, because things will be missed, because things do come into email that are not business related. And clutter will absolutely confuse that particular issue. Then also, when you're actually managing what's going on with customers, probably not a great idea to make your spreadsheets as the be-all, end-all. Not saying you shouldn't use Excel, because I absolutely love it, especially CSV files, if anybody knows. So that's something that I would enjoy as well, but not necessarily as my go-to for software that I'm going to use to manage my customers' issues. And then, of course, Post-it notes, they just make me chuckle. They're absolutely useful in a million different ways, but again, should not be your go-to, because if it's a piece of paper, it could get thrown away. What do you think about the other things in regards to having like free software, Brian?
So the mantra I use is you get what you pay for in most things. And so you have to beware free tools. They may not be the best fit of your business. The second thing to consider here is the cost of implementing a new business-focused software, such as an RMM or PSA system or anything that's deeply embedded in your business workflows. The cost is much more than just the licensing itself. It's actually cost more in terms of how it will, how much it costs to use those workflows. How much it costs to train, to embed those in your processes, to implement the systems if there's any kind of integration work or data work that needs to be done. So there's a lot of costs that are above and beyond the licensing costs themselves. So no tool is really free. There's always a cost. And if that tool is not purposed for your business well, if it doesn't meet your needs and have optimized workflows and integrations, then it's actually going to cost you more than paying for a tool that is better in those ways. The other thing to notice is it's not a fact of more is better, right? So free tools aren't a problem because they don't offer enough. Sometimes they offer a lot and it's just not optimized. But the other side of the scale is also hard to beware and important to beware. It's beware bloatware. So if you have a tool that is much larger, much more complex than you need, then it's actually going to detract from your efficiency. Let's say you're a one-man or a three-man MSP shop and your main focus is ticketing and flat fee billing, then you need to have a tool that will do those things well and efficiently. But if that tool also has complex customizability in terms of the workflows and fields, if the billing modules are overly complex, you have inventory and asset management capabilities, which are great, but they have a high configuration burden. Well, that tool has actually become a little bit of a time burglar. and is not helping your business, you'll be spending more time managing the management tool than you will actually benefiting from those workflows. So choosing the tool that is aligned with your needs specifically, and beware bloatware, it will often steal your time and make you less efficient in the long run.
You know, that's true. That is absolutely true. And, you know, since we've gotten to the point where we're progressing here, we've gone from the reactive, proactive, why you would want to be more proactive. And I'm sure that everybody that has a business always wants to be more efficient with no matter what they do. And how would you do that? Well, with it's no secret. The title of our webinar today has to do with RMM and a PSA. So that just means remote monitoring management in general, because there's plenty of great solutions out there. But more importantly, what would you use it for? Well, first off, you know, think of it as like a quick backstory of where things like this came about. So there were people that, you know, say 10 years ago, they used to call themselves, well, they were MSPs before they knew they were MSPs. So for example, you'll notice that they would use a particular remote access tool, or maybe a particular antivirus tool, or even something they do for patching, whether it be something they do manually, or they have to go on location, or they just do it with a particular other product. So they had their specialty products, but they were different pages or different web pages that they would have to actually log into, wasting time. But an RM product would allow you to do all of that within the same platform. You know, for example, the most common question you would get, well, patch management, they love that. That being able to centrally manage all of that's fantastic. But the one that would be a problem at times is someone that is in love, or at least in like, with a particular AV solution. Well, in my opinion, they all seem to want to at least tell you that they're going to deliver the same thing. If they actually do or not, that's where some fall short. But in theory, they all would offer the same or similar protection. But when things go wrong, how do you fix that, right? So at that point, you need the central management to be able to fix that quicker, because when it goes wrong, it can go wrong and it only turns worse if you don't fix it quickly. So having the ability to do that in a central management, like a remote monitoring management platform, would give you that protection. And then, of course, having the ability to come in and being able to monitor and manage all devices. So if devices come online within a network, how do you know? Well, you would have the ability to possibly install additional agents to make sure that you're protecting all of their devices. Because as soon as you don't have an agent on that particular machine, and that is the one that gets into the network, and it's attached to the other parts of the network, guess what? The entire network is vulnerable at this point. So if you don't do that, you might want to reconsider or change the way that your contracts are written so that you're not the one on the hook for that, okay? Then obviously having the ability to have just being more efficient, more effective, being able to use iPads and cell phones in general, and being able to be on the go and still take care of your customers. Having all of that information in the same, not even to mention talking about our backup solution. Now, our backup solution is kind of similar to the way that the remote monitoring management platforms are these days, for the simple fact that we actually went through it. And, you know, for example, think about years ago, you used to have a file and folder style backup. And then you'd have an on-site backup, and then you'd have a cloud backup, and then you'd have maybe a tape backup, and then one that did some data sources, maybe it did some SQL or Exchange. But then you had others that did images, and then others that actually did VMware. So you're just thinking about it. You've got all these different products that you're, again, having to manage it, right? And instead of having all of these different products, how would you like to be able to do all of that under one platform and be able to manage that in the same RMM solution that you're going to work with? Yet again, another integration that we have within our products is actually our MSP, our PSA solutions as well. Could you tell us more on that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. So we often think of PSA and RMM together as being that whole product for the MSPs, or that end-to-end system. PSA handling the business end of things, RMM handling the technical implementation delivery part of things. So tracking, planning, resolution, and execution. Two sides of that same coin, two parts of similar workflows. They themselves are actually single panes of glass in terms of being the coalescence of their own domains. You talked about all the things that RMMs manage, from AV to automation tasks to network discovery and inventory, and much, much more than that. On the PSA side of things, it itself is a coalescence of ticketing, time tracking, billing, knowledge management, technician management, reporting, invoicing, a whole lot of different things that way back in the day used to be separate systems, but there's value putting them together. So I mentioned these as being two sides of the same coin. So there is, a lot of value in thinking of things from that holistic approach, which we'll talk about better. But PSA as a whole, it helps you reduce errors, omissions, and inaccuracies in your business. That's the best way to say it. Whether that's not understanding which of your customers are profitable, not understanding which technicians are doing the best work, not understanding which issues are the most important thing to do. So prioritizing that issues properly, metricing your SLA and ensuring you meet your commitments. Your PSA helps protect you from all of those things and make sure you're delivering the best quality service possible. I'll give you an example of time tracking. If time tracking is very difficult, and we've actually seen this where I've been on site and seen technicians actually writing down their time in their Outlook calendar or on a piece of paper, and then they'll track it at the end of the week because time tracking is really difficult. When they're working a ticket, they had a separate tool for time tracking. It was really difficult. It's outside of their workflow, and it made things very difficult for them. Cost them an extra 5 minutes per ticket. Well, if you spend 5 minutes per ticket on something that could be removed with better tooling and better tooling integration, that's going to add up. Let's say you close 50 tickets a week. Well, that adds up to 10,000 minutes on the year, and that adds up to money off your bottom line, right? So it's very, very important. The other thing is around inaccuracy. If you're writing all your time entries down and putting them at the end of the week, you're going to make mistakes. Everyone's human. No one is perfect. Mistakes will happen. And a customer who gets billed 100 hours as expected every month is going to be happier than the customer who gets 110 the first month and 90 the second. Sure, it evens out. But the reality is having that clear expectation and meeting of that expectation, and that's true for SLAs, that's true for delivery of service, it's true for time to resolution, it's true for responsiveness, it's true for billing, it's true for every aspect of the service that you deliver. So removing those errors of omission, tracking, and inaccuracy is really the key benefit, but there's of course a lot more. Now I mentioned earlier that these things are two sides of the same coin. So what does it look like when you have that coin really working seamlessly end to end? The reality is that's giving you even more value for the MSP and for your technicians and your workflow, ultimately your business. So putting your RMM and your PSA together in a meaningful integration is taking those two sides of the coin and making a single workflow out of it, that single pane of glass experience. It's going to give you better quality of service, reduce errors, and automate things. I often ask people who are not using an integrated system how often they take to do their billing at the end of the month. And I've actually heard that some people even take a whole week, a single person a whole week of time to do their billing and tracking at the end of the month. Well, wouldn't it be great if you do mostly flat fee billing, your RMM system knows how many workstations and servers you have. It knows most of what you're going to be billing for, especially if you run a 100% fully managed business model. So automating that billing based on that data is a no-brainer, right? So having your RMM flow that data through to the PSA, automating that billing, you've just saved probably not an entire week, but a good portion of that person's time, and they can spend that doing more important things that add value to your customers. So this is what having a combined system does. The other thing it does is help you service workflows in the point where they start. If you're in your RMM system troubleshooting an issue and you can update the ticket right from there, that's value. If you're in a PSA system and you can get in data that came from the RMM and you don't have to switch back and forth, you're able to service your workflows from the point of inception as far down that workflow as possible. Doing that will save you time. It will reduce reduce waste, and that will affect the bottom line at the end of the year. So this is where not only are PSA and RMM really integral parts of your service offering, but having those two sides of the coin together and merged, that's where you really see the value. And so, we're really trying to evangelize here that having a deeply integrated system is a really important part of your success. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this? And I think later on we definitely want to get into an example of what this can look like. And we'll start, Jeff, you'll kick that off for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to. I think the first thoughts that I think of in this case are being able to scale, because it's the one thing that you may hear from customers is that, well, maybe they don't feel like they may need it or something to that effect, or maybe they don't feel like they have enough business to need it. But at that point, you know what, they're never going to if they don't figure out a way to automate and put some systems in place so that they can scale. So you're absolutely right. And having the product in this particular scenario that you can be more efficient and be able to do twice as much work in half the time. And then you were talking about spending an entire week for billing. If you think about it, how much is your time worth? If you saved yourself 30 minutes and you bill customers $100 an hour, guess what? You just paid for the product. And I'm pretty sure that you'll figure out a way to save more than just 30 minutes a month for you to be able to find value in the solution. So what I think we should do in this case is maybe we actually pull up the remote management dashboard and show you how the two products kind of work together and then kind of flow from one product to the next. What do you think of that?
That sounds great. And I will say that for the most part, we're talking here about what are the benefits of having RMM and PSA working together. And of course, we offer both RMM and PSA tools. So we're going to show you an example of a connected system and some of the benefits you can gain from it using our products as those examples.
Gotcha. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so if this is the first time seeing the remote management dashboard, I'm guessing that you've never seen one like this. If you do, I don't know why you're in my dashboard, but you'll notice where it says settings, and then under PSA integration, and if you haven't started up a trial, you would need to, and you'd actually see the word setup. And I technically don't have the view on this particular screen, but it would ask you for an email address if you've ever had a trial before, or if you're currently using MSP Manager separately, that you can actually integrate a standalone account. So that's a good question that customers have. I say that, you know what, hey, Brian and Jeff, you guys are awesome. You've shown, well, that's just me talking, but that's, you guys were talking about these products. You know what, hey, you know what, we're gonna give it a shot. We wanna see how good it really is. So, and maybe they're already using the other, that you can actually integrate the two. But if not, you can also start the trial directly from the RM platform, which is the awesome simplicity and flexibility that we're able to give you in this case. So once you've gone through the initial setup and say you come back into the remote management dashboard, you could go to settings and then PSA integration, and now it's going to show configure and uninstall. So in this case, you would want to go to configure. And what this is going to do is it gives you a quick rundown of some of the basic configurations that you have from the RM side. And when I say basic, I don't mean they're simple, but at the same time, they're absolutely powerful. So don't just misinterpret what I mean. So in this case, it says naming format. We're talking about the client name, device name, check name. So it's that simple that it actually goes from, or it gives you the client name, the device name, and the check name as part of the ticket. So now you already know who it is, which device, and what the problem was. So that's a good thing to have. Now, I'll tell you that you can always have less than that if you want, but I've always said that instead of that, how about just remove your mouse and just start tabbing everywhere in the future? So that way, if you want more complexity. But you'll notice here where it says servers and workstations, we have auto create ticket. It's grayed out. The reason being is because that's actually configured in the MSP Manager solution. So, you know, maybe Brian will bring that up or point that out later on in the call. But more importantly, it's just not configured here, so you'll know. But mainly, you'll see where it says disable outage email alerts, disable outage SMS, and in recovery SMS and email. These are actually referring to the check failures from the remote management dashboard. Just remember this, the check failures from the remote management dashboard. So if you're using the dashboard already, it would basically have check failures. Then separately and independently, there would be tickets that are in your system. So those are two completely separate things. So if you've decided that the MSP Manager solution is right for you and you don't want to receive every issue twice, I mean, because it could be a situation where you have your support at email address that's coming right back into your ticketing solution as well, and now you're getting double tickets. So to avoid the noise, so that way you know when the wolf is crying versus it's crying wolf, all you'd have to do is basically just check these boxes if you've decided you no longer want to receive these check failures. But at the same time, let's just say, for example, that you haven't quieted the noise quite yet. So you're not quite ready to have a full-on tickets coming from all the places to bring into your system. But you do want the ability to be able to open tickets from the remote management dashboard based on issues that you deem as important. So in this case, let's just say, for example, that we go under the outages tab. So you'll notice that there is a checks tab, but in this case, we have an outages tab. So you'll notice that there are problems. For example, here's one that says it's an open outage, but there is no ticket. So for example, let's say that we go and right click on that particular alert or outage, and then we click open. So what we're doing right now is we're attempting to open up a ticket within your system, and at that point it actually opens up a ticket in the MSP Manager solution, right? So now you could come in and internally you could go and type in, say for example, maybe you're talking to your other technicians, maybe it's more than just you, that I have this one, right? So now we're talking to other techs internally to let them know, but at the same time you're still in the remote management platform and you're still doing the work that you're currently doing anyway. Then also you'll notice that it says add note. We can even make a public note if need be. And at this point, this would be to the customer that all is well. Because you're never going to tell them there's something wrong, especially if you're the MSP, right? So at this point, you're on it. You're going to take care of the business. So now we've added that as well. So let's just say in this case that we're saying, you know what, there's a C drive problem. And you know what, maybe you have access to that box and you can do a take control session. Or maybe you want to do some remote background as well and do a little investigation and whatnot on that device. So you've gone in, you've done your sessions or a remote background or a remote session directly to the machine, and you've gathered some information. And now you can actually go back to that particular ticket, for example, and even add some time. And when it says add time in this case, this is actually based on the configuration that you have from the MSP Manager solution directly. So now when you click a drop down, you can select which time rate you'd like to apply for. Now, in this particular scenario, we have a customer that has a prepaid agreement of, say, 12 hours, for example. So every time we bill against those guys, initially, it's going to be towards their block hour or their retainer agreement. So at this point, this is where we could type in, say, our QuickBooks info, and that's if you're using QuickBooks. It's not required, but basically, if you're not, in this case, it could just be your time entry detail. And I always type Ted, so I don't know if there's anyone named Ted out there. I apologize if that disrespects you. But you'll see in this case that I can put on the date and even a start time, end time. So at that point, when I click save, guess what? I've gone in and I've added an internal note. I've added a public facing note. I've added time against tickets, and that's directly from within the system. And now, I mean, at this point, if I needed to, I could click view ticket in MSP Manager. And what I'll do now is I think I'm just going to hand this off directly to Brian and let him work his way through when it comes to MSP Manager in different scenarios as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jeff. Great breakdown. I love the wolf is crying versus crying wolf. That was my favorite part. So definitely we'll do a, yeah, we're going to do a quick demo of what a connected system looks like from the PSA side. And we're going to start off where Jeff left off, basically. So he was working on a device, MSP SE0035. And so I can actually load all the asset details that exist within RMM, right? So this is one of the machines at the Bob's Dog Grooming Company. I can actually see a lot of information that comes from RMM about this device. You know, network information, operating system information. So again, if I'm troubleshooting a ticket that starts on my PSA, I don't have to leave that PSA to understand things about this device. And one of the most important things there is I can actually look at the past outages, right? So I can actually see, okay, what are all the outages that have occurred from RMM on this device? And so it's actually tracking every outage that has ever occurred on this device since you connected the systems. It's not just 30 days. I believe actually in the RMM dashboard, we only visualize that for a short-term period of time because you're not really thinking of long-term trends when you're talking about RMM because it's about execution, resolving issues, monitoring the device now. However, from a PSA perspective, knowing the trends of a device, really important. It might actually flag whether or not there's a project necessary to replace this server or update it, or whether you should be spending time to proactively dig in to find out why this particular machine is having so many problems with its C drive. So there is something that is consuming the space of this disk. So we should really sell them a new hard drive. That's a revenue opportunity. And then, of course, it's going to cause tickets to stop flowing. So having this information really helps you with trends. And I can actually, from an example, here are the tickets that were raised from this. And I can actually very, very easily see, Jeff actually, mentioned during this webinar, okay, all is well, I've got this one. So, those notes were added and can be visible from within the PSA system. As well, you can make notes in your PSA system, time entries, notes, expenses, responses, and those will, of course, go to the customer. Any notes or time entry that's added can be seen from the RMM side. So you have that bi-directional view of the world. Now, Jeff didn't mention it, but the time entries can be added as well, and those are customizable with different rates. You're not stuck with just one rate. You can actually use multiple rates. Now, that's an artifact of the MSP Manager specifically, but just the idea of having that bi-directional communication back and forth really talks to you about what a connected system really should be. Now, I'm going to tackle this from a slightly different angle. Let's go to my help desk system, and I'm going to open up a different ticket that I had raised earlier today. And the reason I want to show this is, what happens when I have a new ticket? Okay, well, hey, I may want to start a time entry. I can do that with a click of a button. I may want to add some notes. I may want to add a response. And that's all stuff that I can do very easily from the action bar. But also, Jeff mentioned you can take control from the dashboard to resolve an issue. Well, can I do that from here? And the answer is yes. With a fully connected system, I can actually do that same take control operation right from your ticket. So I mentioned earlier that having those two sides of the coin together is about making sure that the end of your workflow is serviced from the point of inception. So the point of inception of my workflow today was, hey, a check failed. It's assigned to me via ticket routing rules, which I'll show you in a second. I know I need to action it. I can look at all the data in the asset around, and I showed you that earlier, about this machine. Look at history, look at past tickets, look at network information, hardware information. I can see what I need to about that machine. I can look at history, I can look at trends, and I can, if it's not in the system written in words, I can easily take control and get that data through the in-depth background tools, or by actually connecting and taking control of desktop to resolve the issue. So again, all that was done from the point of inception, and time tracking, that time is easily tracked and billed for all within that integrated system. So a couple more things to mention. I talked about ticket routing, and so did Jeff. He mentioned the ticket routing. So in the system today, there's actually some pretty simple but very flexible rules about routing tickets to the appropriate resources. So I can actually control when a ticket gets routed to, I can control when a ticket gets routed to a technician and which technician it gets routed to in the system using some simple rules. We can route by saying, okay, this goes to, I want to assign it to the customer assigned user, to the location assigned user. You can also look at user skills, and we actually have a matrix to say that, hey, Jeff's really good at Exchange. Brian's really good at a domain controller issue. So if the check had something to do with Exchange, maybe I should give it to them. Like if the issue had to do with Exchange, rather. If the check had to do with a hardware failure, I'm going to route it to the guy who's great at hardware. If the check had to do with a backup failure, I'm going to route it to the guy who's best at backup. You can have the system automatically do that, and as well as workload. So again, this is an artifact of a well-connected system, that you have that ability to use the data that came from RMM to define the routing of the ticket and how that gets handled. Now, at the risk of showing something a little bit before its time, but also I'm very excited to do that. We're doing a lot more when it comes to workflow and ticket routing. And I'm going to give you a quick glimpse at an engine that we're actually having beta right now in order to be a lot more granular about using that data. So there's a lot of data in the RMM system. There's a lot of data in the PSA system. There's a lot of data that comes in the outage that gets shared between the two systems. So we're working on a way to inspect all of that information and very granularly choose how things are handled. So here you have a scenario where and this is built in our beta version right now. So of course, what you see here may and will likely be adjusted slightly before it hits the wild, but it shows you the intention. The intention here is that in this rule, if it's a server and it contains backup, or if it's a workstation and contains the word backup or critical, I am going to assign this to the critical queue, set the value as critical, create the ticket, and assign it to the technician via user skills. So those routing actions could actually be based on some very complex conditional rules, again, using the data that I have in both systems, in a truly connected system, to help define how work gets prioritized and actioned. So that's a glimpse into the future, but that's really where we're headed. And we're talking in this webinar about the benefits of a connected system. We talked about remote control from the ticket. We talked about asset details, outage history being saved in the PSA system. We talked about assets being populated with asset data from the RMM, and that actually happens automatically. We showed take control. We showed ticket actions from the RMM. We showed RMM data in the ticket. So we're really showing that bidirectional connected system. And we feel that has so much value that we're working on features in the future, such as more granular rules engine to try and make that even more compelling. So, not only are we trying to convey to you guys that there is value in having a well-connected workflow, but we see that value too. So we're building better ways to connect those things. So that's a good endpoint for talking about what a connected system looks like from the PSA side of things. Ashley, do you have anything to add here, or do we have any questions or anything to address at this point?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions coming in. One of them has to do with repeated failures. How should a well-integrated system handle a bunch of repeated failures? For example, would it generate a bunch of tickets in your PSA if your RMM detects repeated failures, and what should that look like?
Right. So definitely you should try to avoid repeat failures wherever possible. I'm going to show the old style of ticket routing in this example, and I'm just going into the older interface. For those who are familiar with MSP Manager, you will have noticed that the interface that I was showing was maybe slightly different than what you're used to. That's actually our new UI, and you can see here we give the option to try out that new UI, and the old UI, of course, is available for you as well. Anybody who's starting a trial today will get the new UI available to them. For those who are interested in trying it, definitely reach out to us. Our release manager is definitely taking names and offering that to anybody who's interested. But basically, the idea is that if a ticket is raised about the same issue, and that current ticket is open. So if there's an outage about an issue that already has a ticket, and the ticket is still open, typically MSPs will want to just append to that ticket rather than create a new one. If a ticket, if an outage is raised that is related to a check where there is a ticket, and the ticket was just closed, 10 hours ago, well, maybe we should just reopen that ticket. And these are rules that you can actually define. Also, it's really important to do that from a noise perspective. It's important to try and make sure that you know when the wolf is crying versus crying wolf, to use Jeff's wonderful statement. And so repeat failure avoidance is one of those things that helps with that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. I got another question here, guys. Someone's asking, on one of the slides, we mentioned ownership of tickets as one of the big benefits of PSA, but massively for an integrated RMM and PSA system, and they're asking to expand a little bit on that.
Sorry, I'm not sure if could you repeat that, Ashley? My apologies.
Yeah, sure. So our trusty viewer is referencing one of the older slides where it discusses ownership of tickets as one of the benefits for not just PSA, but an integrated RMM and PSA system. And I think they're trying to find out how an integrated system helps bring transparency and order to knowing who owns what tickets.
Right. So it's pretty easy, once you're in the PSA to see who owns the ticket via the list here. So I can actually see, this one is assigned to Jeff, this one's assigned to Bill. You can actually also easily filter based off the user. So I can look at, Amanda's tickets or Bill's tickets or Ahmed's tickets. It's easy to do that via filter. So that's how we tackle that in terms of knowing who owns the tickets. One of the really cool things about the ticket routing is one of the options there was workload. And how the workload balancer works is if I have, let's say I have 10 users assigned to the customer and I route by customer assigned users, but I want to give it to the guy out of the 10 who has the least amount of tickets on their plate. Well, that's what the workload balance option does. So it'll actually give it to the guy who has the least amount of open tickets. So it actually helps to do some of your triage balance for you. These are things typically done by a traffic cop who's triaging tickets as they come in, and the system is designed to do some of that on their behalf. There are some things we're looking at in the future, and I know there will be future webinar topics, but there's definitely some things we're considering in terms of saved views and different visualizations that will actually give even more insight to things like per technician performance and things of that nature.
Hey Brian, I see that Billy is asking about, it said something about, is there a way to make tickets quickly? Because when they're on the go, they don't have time to fill out some cumbersome ticket management software that they have to get the work done. So how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, and I want to take a step back. I actually realized there is a better answer for that question. So you can see here in this example system, I went to the user stats dashboard, and here's actually another view where I can see just some high-level dashboard style views of all the users and what they've been doing, how many tickets they've had, what work have they done recently. So it gives me that user statistics bill, and Jeff seems to be one of our top performers. Good job, Jeff. Talking about the tickets themselves. First of all, when I add a ticket, we're very non-prescriptive in terms of what we asked for. The only thing required is the service item, which you can see was actually automatically filled out because I have a default. If that isn't appropriate, I can select one from the list, and it requires the ticket title. So it only requires just title and service item, and I can save and start a timer, and there we go. So that was just one field and a title, and that was it. If that workflow isn't fast enough for you, there is this option here at the top that you can see called the quick ticket. And the quick ticket gives me the ability to, again, just select the customer. The service item is selected automatically, but I can, of course, change if I want a different service, and click the title and then save the ticket.
So really quickly, speaking of creating tickets quickly and ticket routing, Wayne is asking, can you allow certain customers to not be assigned to particular tech? Say there's an issue with that tech for that particular customer. So instead of assigning to specific techs, can we direct it to not send requests to a specific tech?
As it stands today, there isn't a way to do a disallow rule, but you can accomplish that by just doing allows. Right? You can also accomplish that with customer access groups. So in the settings side of things, under users, under user management, I've got access groups. So very similar for those who are familiar with RMM, you can actually create an access group that includes a set of customers. So if you have a guy who, there's a few customers that he's just not, trained properly to handle, you should create a customer access group that limits his ability to see and act on those customers outside of the group. That's the way that tends to be handled. Again, you can do that with customer assigned users, but this actually will accomplish that probably in a better way because it really limits their ability to touch that problem relationship at all.
Hey Brian, I'm only asking this one just because anytime I look at a webinar, I want to see something that I'm not going to see anywhere else. So I know that you showed the workflow. Is there anything else you can at least maybe you can't do much with it, but at least talk about a little bit more about what our goals are or what we want to bring to the table in the future within the MSP Manager solution. Is there anything you can talk about there?
Cool stuff. Yeah, I'm not set up with a demo of this quite yet. We're not far enough on the alpha path, but we are heavily working on a feature that basically gives you the ability to customize a dashboard view of the system. So these are drag and drop customizable widget-based dashboard that's actually very usable, flexible, and going to be pretty extensive in terms of what kind of widgets and visualizations you can make. We're going to start small, of course, and then build it up. Right now, that features in alpha. So again, if you are interested in joining the alpha, reach out to us, and we will get you in touch with Carla, our release manager. If you're already on Carla's big list, you can just give her a poke and say, "Hey, Brian talked about something after Jeff went fishing, but we're really excited about this. It is going to be a massive bit of value in terms of helping your workflows and your data visualization move into the future. The intention here is so that, let's say you have 10 different people in your organization. They each have slightly different jobs, different personas. They can each configure their own dashboard that is optimized to the work that they do. Let's say you wear 5 hats in your organization. At the end of the month, you wear a billing hat. Every day you wear a technician hat. Every Friday you wear a management hat where you look at statistics and write out some reports. You can create 3 dashboards: a billing dashboard, a help desk dashboard, a knock dashboard, and a technician management dashboard that each have the data that you need to make key decisions and move in the right directions and accomplish tasks. So the framework we're building on right now is that drag and drop customizable widget-based experience, and we're really excited about it. And then what you'll see in the future is enough functionality so that you can create those per persona dashboard views to accomplish your tasks even better in the future.
That sounds exciting.
Well, we are super excited to see all of these changes coming, hopefully, very, very soon. I want to take a moment. If are there any more questions? Let's see. Doesn't look like it. So if there are no other questions, we will give you some time back into your day. As I said at the beginning, the session's been recorded and will be made available to you in the coming days. And I want to thank Brian and Jeff for being here, and I want to thank all of you for joining us.
Thanks, guys, and have a great day.